Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We have already laid the basis for the understanding of the rays that come after the first ray of will and power and after the second ray of love wisdom. In fact, when we look at the third ray is a blending. The third ray is a blending of the first and second rays. It is a merging of these two. And we would therefore say that the first ray of will and power and the second ray of love wisdom merge, and they produce the third ray of active intelligence. The third ray of active intelligence is a very complex ray. It is one of the three major rays. And it is important because it gives birth to the minor rays here, the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. And so we could say that under the hegemony, under the guardianship, under the tutelage of the third ray of active intelligence, we have the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh rays. So that tells you how important the third ray is. It is the great synthesizer of the activities of these four minor rays. Major rays, minor rays. So the third ray plays a very important part in the scheme of things. I would, of course, like to plunge into some very academic statements, but it's a hot night, and so I will go to the opposite. When we think of the first ray, we think of will and power. And if we look at the animal kingdom, as I'm going to do now, we have, of course, the horse as the symbol of headlong flight with power, ability to carry somebody almost its own weight and carry that load very fast indeed. And it's good to do this, occasionally to review, just to bring back stability to your mind. Review the animals that are correlated to I'll have to start that one again. No more interruptions, please. It is useful to be able to correlate the rays to a system like the animal kingdom. And with regard to that, we take the horse as the symbol of the first ray of will and power. We talk about its headlong flight. We know that in history, the horse has played a great part in the development of explored regions and also in the battles that have plagued humanity since the dawn of time. Therefore, aptly under the first ray of will and power. Under the second ray, the great mother ray of our solar system, the ray that is represented by indigo, the great ray of love wisdom, the natural ray of our solar system. Under this ray we have the elephant which can be so gentle and at the same time so sacrificing, and famous, of course, for its memory and for its wisdom. And so the second ray of love wisdom, the elephant. The third ray of active intelligence naturally sits upon the animal that we call the monkey, always fidgety, always picking up and putting down, always searching around for opportunities to divert itself. The fourth ray of art and harmony naturally falls upon that animal that we all love, the cat, who loves to have harmony around it, who loves to maintain its poise, and slinks away at the first sign of stress. Always remember that the fourth ray is the ray of art and harmony through conflict. You cannot have a fourth ray in your complement of rays without having the element of conflict involved. Then we have the fifth ray, which can show up in an animal as stubbornness and crystallized habits, and I must point here to the camel. The camel, which has this sturdy ability to keep going, to maintain itself in the most hostile conditions, requiring only certain treatment and obeying certain laws given to it by its camel driver. The camel, very stubborn creature indeed. I have introduced into my works many a poem and essay on the nature of the camel, and it is worth reading them if you are interested in this particular ray, the fifth ray of concrete knowledge and analytical science. Then we have the sixth ray of devotion and idealism. And of course, the animal for this has got to be the dog, capable of such great devotion to its master. And of course, immediately there comes to mind the nature of humanity too. And if you have strong sixth rays, there has to be devotion and that all-important element of the sixth ray, which we call faith. Faith. And faith is now quickly becoming justified by the discoveries of quantum mechanics. The quantum fields are up against totally different new laws compared to the laws that govern physics as you and I have learnt them for so many years. And what indeed is happening is that science is confronted with the astral plane. And the material of quantum, minute as it is the substance of emotion. And that is why they are registering now that quantum often responds to the observer, responds to strange things like faith, responds to will, and so on. Great things are going to come out of this. Fortunately or unfortunately, the fifth ray of concrete knowledge and analytical science is going out of manifestation at this time. It will be out for a considerable period of time, and the emphasis that civilization in the West has placed on the fifth ray of concrete knowledge and analytical science will slide away in favor. Taking its place will come the fourth ray of art and harmony through conflict, particularly emphasized naturally in Europe. And the new century is going to see a resurgence of the fourth ray of art and harmony coming into the great cities of Europe and there establishing a new renaissance. When I came out on tour in Italy, came out of the airport, I think it was at Bologna, my attention was called to a huge hoarding outside the airport, and across it had Renaissance, the new Renaissance, and it was advertising a congress, a meeting of architects who were coming together to bring out a new Renaissance in Europe. And so within only 10 years of my prophecy, already the sights of the new Renaissance are beginning to show themselves. But mankind is representative of the universe, so representative of the universe. Paracelsus said that man was a solar system in miniature. Man is a solar system in miniature. We are a very strange order, hierarchy of entities, we who make up the human race. And it is said that reflected into us from the world of nanometers, is that the word, from what is ultimately tiny, from the world of things that are a million times smaller than the atom, right the way through up to man, there are images of me, of you, to be found, images of our nature to be found in the tiny. Equally so, it is said that we are gods in the making, that we are in the process of unfolding into splendid immortal beings, and that we all reflect these great immortal beings that inhabit our universe. We reflect them in ourselves, and they reflect in themselves our own nature. And so we should always turn to the human figure, the human form, and look for signs there of immortal things, like the matter of the 7 rays. Man is the grand symbol of the universe. He is the grand symbol of the universe. And in the human hand, you will soon be given out a sheet with this on it. In the human hand, we have so much symbolized. The human hand that has enabled us to raise ourselves so rapidly in the last thousands of years to a position of great ease and comfort on the planet compared to what we were used to. And in the symbol of the hand, we have, of course, an extension. It's an extended part of the human arm. And the 7 rays are beautifully emphasized in the parts of the upper limb. Here we have the ray of will and power, where there is muscle, in great quantity, capable of moving the parts of the arm purposefully and powerfully. And so the upper arm, the ray of will and power. The forearm is a combination of many muscles and nerves and bones. And it is the place where the power is given quality. It is representative of the 2nd ray of love wisdom. The power is transformed into a variety of movements of all kinds of quality. And then we have the hand, which is the symbol of the thumb and the 4 lower rays in the fingers. And the hand is this extraordinary device, which is capable of almost any kind of movement. The ability to polish a diamond, the ability to sew a heart up, to be able to transform with a delicate surgeon's movements the facial features of a person, as you all well know. So we say that the small finger, the the small finger, represents the fourth ray of art and harmony through conflict. It represents elegance, and people who feel great artistic sensitivity often extend the small finger. Elegance, refinement, poise, artistry, and sensitivity. The next finger is the finger that we place the ring on, and we say this is the ray of devotion, the sixth ray of devotion and idealism. Note how some of you who will teach the subject long after I'm gone, note how it is important to try and give examples and analogies with everything that you teach, because that makes it much more simple. And so the ring finger, the ray of devotion and idealism. Then the middle finger, this is the finger which we allocate to the seventh ray of ceremonial order and ritual, because it plays a great part in many of the mudras of yoga, the hand positions of the fingers in yoga, and it is often used in ceremonial. The fifth ray we allocate to the forefinger, in this sense that we're using it now in regard to the seven rays, and this is the finger that is specific, and it is the fifth ray of concrete knowledge. This and this and this. It indicates the ability to categorize, to analyze, to be able to separate, to purify, to make distinctive, and so on. Don't mix it up with the forefinger used as the symbol of divinity. The forefinger used as the symbol of divinity is one of extreme power, and it is divine power is symbolized by the forefinger. The great picture that we have on, I'm sorry, I'll just have to get the words right here. What's the name of the most wonderful ceiling? The Sistine Chapel. Thank you very much. All right. The wonderful Sistine Chapel has, of course, this great symbol of the use of the forefinger, with God reaching down with his forefinger towards Adam's own parts, as it were. Then, of course, we have the thumb, and the thumb is the synthesizer of all of them. The thumb has this extraordinary factor that no animal has got, which makes it so distinctive as part of the human race, that it can oppose all the fingers. It can oppose all the fingers. The anthropoids have not got that ability. We have it. And it enables us to be provided with a variety of grips, a variety of options for the way in which we use the fingers. And it acts as a sort of synthesis for the action of all four of them. Don't forget, the thumb has still got something of the compassion of the second ray related to it, but it also has powerful musculature, giving it the mix that I started off with here of will and power, and of course of love wisdom. And so we can see man as an extraordinary person, placed almost as a balance between the infinitely small and the infinitely large. And in that position of balance, we represent the fourth ray of art and harmony through conflict. We, the human race, come under the rulership as a race of the fourth ray of art and harmony through conflict. The middle ray, the balancing always of many factors. You have often heard me describe how the human body represents the bringing together of the densest material in the universe. Material like iron and calcium and phosphorus. The dense elements are brought together in man, and they are flooded with spirituality. And we have a gram of iron in our bodies, a gram of iron necessary to provide the oxygen-carrying power of the red blood that flows in our arteries. And yet that iron is infused with consciousness. It is infused with consciousness of a high order, not just insect consciousness or plant consciousness, but the consciousness of one of the most conscious beings in the universe. Our kingdom is not the highest. Let me go through the kingdoms, and we can more or less place ourselves in this extraordinary situation of being the great balancer of the tiny with the large. Can I hand out something? Can I hand out where's the handout? All right. No, wrong ones, the balance. Oh, on the other side? Yes, thanks. Here you are. Sorry about that, but it'll help. Get the notes together. And so we see in our illustration, man with his famous position of squaring the circle, used by Leonardo da Vinci, and we see him as between the middle kingdom, between seven. Below him, on our left-hand side, on his right, you have the animal kingdom, the third, symbolized by a horse there. You have the plant kingdom, the second, and you have the mineral kingdom, the first. And beyond that, and we mustn't forget it, there is the unknown, diminishing so that our instruments, our microscopes cannot reach it. And we have to use extraordinary methods to pick up what is beyond the atom. Equally so, we can go into the macrocosm. That's the point of it. Any of you are students at Claregate, you will know that what I'm talking about now is the Hermetic philosophy, the philosophy that was given by the god Hermes to mankind. Hermes coming from an inner round of the Venus scheme, as it were. And so we have talked about kingdoms beneath us, and the importance of that is to make sure you understand that you, as spiritual beings struggling towards the light, are responsible for the lower kingdoms. They are your responsibility. And the more spiritually evolved you become, the more these kingdoms come under your guidance, under your protection, under your responsibility. When we go beyond into the macrocosm, we come to the fifth kingdom of nature, and it is the kingdom of devas, the kingdom of devas. And by that we mean beings who are normally invisible to us, who don't have what we would call form structures, but do exist and have a life of their own. Some of them are moving down into grosser and grosser kingdoms. Others, like us, are moving out of the grossest forms, the lower kingdoms, into the higher. We call this the fifth kingdom, the kingdom of the gods, if you like, the devas. Then after that we have the kingdom which involves very, very high beings indeed. And by that we mean those who know for certain that they are immortal, who know that they are immortal, who are beginning to realize their destiny. And we are therefore talking about the sixth kingdom, and I have called it the Chohanic kingdom, the kingdom of Chohans, those individual extraordinary beings who are able to hold their focus of attention for such sustained periods of time that they can create their own scenarios, and they are able to take you into their scenarios according to the lessons that you need to learn. Extraordinary beings indeed. They come from an inner round of planets. We mean planets that exist in subtle substance, in the substance of higher manas, not just mental substance, which we produce thought forms in, as being an example of the minor reflecting the major. They have the ability to create forms at will. And beyond them, of course, we have beings that are so immense cosmically that they might inhabit a galaxy. They may be the lord of a galaxy. And so we see that we are placed between the two, the macrocosm and the microcosm. And it has been a teaching, particularly in ancient Egypt, that if we reflect what goes on in higher kingdoms in ourselves, we will be able to evolve the more rapidly. And that is a very important point to make. The lower shall not know the higher, and the higher shall know the lower, but it is granted by the higher to let the lower know when it pleases. And when we struggle for mankind, when we read the esoteric classics, when we meditate faithfully each day regularly, we are reflecting the divine cosmic beings, and therefore we will earn their gratitude, as it were. Enough about man as a balance. Always remember the Hermetic philosophy of as above, so below. As above, so below. And if you're looking at an atom, you can construe a universe out of it. Whilst we are here, we should remember the origin of the rays, the origin of the rays. We say that there are 7 great stars of the plough, or Great Bear, and that these we see every night, if we were able to stay awake all night, rotating around the pole star, which these two pointers point towards, the pole star. And every night the stars rotate around the pole star, and if we had a time-lapse camera, we would be able to take that picture showing the clear trace of the stars going all the way around the pole star. You might say, well, so what? The answer to that is to know the point that you are rotating around gives you an opportunity to exercise the most important faculty of all, of bringing your consciousness to a point. And if that point is sunk within Polaris, around which our solar system, galaxy moves, then that is helpful. We say that the 7 rays are emitted from each one of these 7 stars of the Great Bear. We in turn know that they are but part of a greater being. We must say that these energies are picked up by our solar system, manifesting its 3 qualities, and that thereafter the 7 planets of our solar system and the 7 or the 4 non-sacred ones and the sun making the 12th reflect these rays even further. And so the rays are transfused through this belt of planets. Then we have man himself. Let's put him here, his body, as it were. And within man, we have the chakras, the 4 centers, placed within man, and the 7 rays pass through their appropriate chakras. And that is the science, the essence of the esoteric astrology. To be aware of the nature of the divine and to be able to emulate the nature of the divine within ourselves. And by studying the anatomy of the universe and the physiology of the universe, we can apply it to our own anatomy and physiology. Not just in the physical body, but also in the etheric body, in the mental body, and of course in the spiritual nature as well. So I have approached the matter of the 7 rays from a different angle here tonight, and I hope have rather bewildered you a little because of the immense implications of what I've been saying, the detail behind it. And all this is gobbled up by the 3rd ray people. People who have 3rd ray capacities thrive on this sort of thing. They don't follow it into its most intimate detail, but they love the spread of it, the immense extension of human consciousness that it offers. And at this stage, I think we should be able to let you see the next handout. And this handout, in fact, talks about or illustrates what I have been talking about. And I have been talking about the mechanism by which the great law of the occult, correspondences, is monitored. We are in the process of looking at a chart of ray correspondences. You must try and use this language if you are going to represent it in terms of human behavior or ray psychology. Have a look now at the first lateral column and find the third ray which is our subject tonight. And its qualities, you know, they're active intelligence. And the color that we allocate to the third ray is the color green. And so we must remember then that the third ray has an affinity for the color green, nature, the color green. And then we come to the signs of the zodiac, and I'll illustrate this a little later. But the great signs of the zodiac that are in harmony, I should of course have put the belt of the zodiac in here. I should have put the belt of the zodiac in here with the sun within the center of it, and we could have put the signs of the zodiac in quite easily in this extraordinary circle. And so the different signs of the zodiac respond to the 7 rays, and those signs of the zodiac which have an affinity for the third ray of active intelligence are, of course, Libra, more than any of the signs of the zodiac, Capricorn, with a mixture of the first ray and the fifth, and Cancer, very strongly third ray. So now we have some affinities here, correspondences we call them. That green, the color green, and the signs of the zodiac, which you all have in your horoscopes, modified or qualified by the planets that are in those signs, of course. And the great planet of the third ray is Saturn. The great planet of the third ray is Saturn. And it is through Saturn that the heavy karma of the earth is obtained. Because the earth itself is on the third ray of active intelligence, as you will see there in the 1, 2, 3, 4th column below the zodiac, below the 7 rays. So Saturn and the earth are both on the third ray, and Saturn, through correspondences, conveys something of its karma, or the whole element of long-standing karma, to the earth itself. There's a correspondence. Now, amongst the foods, of course, there are 6 foods. I won't go into them now, but the foods favor, or favored by, I should say, the third ray of active intelligence. And if you have a third ray brain, as possibly half of you have in the school here tonight, the third ray brain thrives on carbohydrate, sugars, starches, and so on. The musical note is fa. In the octave beginning with middle C, is it middle C, 256 cycles. Do, re, mi, fa. Fa is the note of Saturn. It is the note of the third ray, and if third ray was required in therapy, then the color green would assist the third ray. It would act upon devas of the green hue, and the devas of the green hue affect the muscular tissue of the human body. And if you are into things like massage and treatment of people with regard to physiotherapy, these statements, these correspondences are important, because green favors muscular weakness. And then you come to politics. That's the great thing about the rays. the enormous embrasure that it has. Politics, whereas fascism comes under the first ray of will and power, or if you like, National Socialism, the ray also that favors the tyrant and favors theocratic despotism, the pharaohs, and so on. That's the first ray. Democracy is the second ray of love wisdom. The second ray of love wisdom. And then socialism comes under the third ray of active intelligence. And the Labour Party has Saturn as its ruler. In the horoscope, if you're expecting strikes and things, and you've got something square to Saturn, then you can be sure the strike is going to hit you hard. And you'll have to fag your own luggage or fag your own body instead of the train doing it. So there you have that relationship. When you come to the gases, it is nitrogen in the first ray of will and power, very inert. Oxygen, favoring the second ray of love wisdom. And hydrogen, through its ability to make acids out of things, gives great activity to the chemistry, the inorganic chemistry particularly. And so you can all equally write in there, if you like. You can write in that same thing under gases perhaps. You can put there alkali is first ray, acid is third ray, and base or salt is second ray. Then under the senses, and remember here we're dealing with correspondences, green, the planet Saturn, favors hearing. If you've got a very afflicted Saturn in your horoscope, you could be deaf. You could be deaf, or might be made deaf through something. And so you can go down, but now look, let's look a little further on, where you find that in the endocrine system of the body, Saturn, the third ray of active intelligence, rules the thyroid gland. And the thyroid gland is the great pacemaker of the body. Not the heart pacemaker, it is the metabolic pacemaker, as it were. Dictates as to how fast the cells in your body are going to burn their glucose. And if you have a high metabolic rate, then it means you're going to demand a lot of glucose and the oxygen that the glucose is burnt in. And so here you have the thyroid gland, the throat chakra, related to all the things in that column. And that is tremendously important. And when you do your studies in the esoteric, you find that the law of correspondences, when you study the thyroid gland, you have an entree into the throat chakra, an entree into the other things that I have mentioned, the color green, the planet Saturn, the planet Earth, carbohydrates, the note Fa, socialism, hydrogen, acid, hearing. And that's the beauty of studying, bearing in mind the law of correspondences to help you along your way. And then, of course, we have nations that come under the third ray of active intelligence. And China, particularly, with its enormous masses of population, comes under, with its personality, of course, under the third ray of active intelligence, and so on. All right, give me 2 minutes. Get myself together. The third ray is the ray of philosophy. And most of us who have lived perhaps several hundred lives on the earth or more, and have lived many years on the earth, we are philosophers. We have learnt from life, and we use what we have learned to judge our situation at any particular time. And for those who are on the third ray, nature is more important to that ray than any other ray. Nature is the wise counselor of third ray types, and it is the good friend of third ray types. As Shakespeare says, and As You Like It, which is a play that depicts an ousted duke and his courtiers and family driven into a forest to live. And they find to their surprise that amongst all this adversity, where they have lost all the niceties of the court, they are able to thrive. They love it because nature has come close to them and they are learning from it. And so the playwright comments that the winter's wind is like an icy tooth tearing and biting at the body. And even when you shrink from the cold of it, you yet know as a philosopher that the wind is there to teach you a lesson, perhaps how to dress, perhaps in what you eat, and many other things. And then the play goes on to talk about adversity and how wonderful a teacher adversity is. I've met youngsters, as you no doubt have, who haven't known what adversity is. They just haven't experienced the kinds of things that you and I have grown up on, have never been hungry, never known what hunger was, who have never known what it has been like to be really cold or exhausted. And of course they need a new philosophy, and they are all around us. And it is the teaching, and As You Like It, that nature can even things up for those who are in adversity. Sweet are the uses of adversity, which like a toad, ugly and venomous, wears yet a jewel in its head. The toad, of course, was much worse than the frog in its grotesqueness, but some of them had a third eye. By that we mean the semblance of an eye placed in the middle of the forehead, middle of the vertex of the head. And the discovery sometimes of the structure suggested that it was a jewel of some sort. And so the playwright compares adversity to the ugliness of the frog, and yet it has this gemstone in its forehead. Sweet are the uses of adversity. And then the playwright talks about the natural scene and how they are responding to that scene. Finds tongues in trees, the whispering of the trees. And when you're in adversity and you're alone, sometimes the sounds can talk to you. Finds tongues in trees, books in the running brooks. The way that the brooks chatter as they pass over the rocks and could be saying all kinds of things to you. Things perhaps that you want to hear, but more than that, that nature wants you to hear, because nature will always try and comfort you in your adversity. Even in the dream state, nature tries very hard to comfort you when the outer world is all torn and bloody. Books in the running brooks, sermons and stones. Sermons and stones. Have you never picked up a stone when you have wandered up a riverbed or on the seashore and felt it in your hand and weighed it, and hasn't it gone with your thoughts as you have peripatetically walked along the seashore, brooding, pondering, wondering? Sermons and stones, and good in everything. And that is the essence of the third ray's qualities, that they can suffer, but they could answer you and say, I take everything with philosophical fortitude. I take everything with philosophical fortitude, no matter how badly things are going. The third ray. Third ray have the ability to read into nature all kinds of things, just as you heard me quote it from As You Like It. But other poets, to see a world in a grain of sand. I'll do that again if I may. To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower, to hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. And that is the spiritual quality of the third ray of active intelligence. Not so much the object that you have picked up, but what it implies, what it symbolizes, as it were. Now, the extraordinary thing about the third ray is that it has an affinity for the third kingdom of nature. The third ray has an affinity for the third kingdom of nature. The first is the mineral, the second is the plant, the third is the animal, and the fourth is the human. And so when you start to do a ray analysis, you want to know these things. You want to know whether the person has some sort of affinity with the animal kingdom. And you have sometimes to say to them, do you sometimes feel that you prefer animals to humans? The answer is quite frequently yes. And I must say that we all fall into this extraordinary state of sometimes not worrying too much how the humans are getting on in the television piece that you're looking at, but what about that animal there? And there are those that have this feeling so deeply that they will go into animal rights. When you ask them about their taking up animal rights, you can usually divide them into two. There are those, what we're talking about, who will help with animal rights, but they divide in two. In that one section will not damage property, and the other section will do anything and damage property, because the third ray soul says that what is morally wrong can never be justified scientifically, artistically, aesthetically, in any possible way. If animals are being ill-treated, and you have to think about this very carefully, if animals are being ill-treated, if somebody is being cruel to an animal, and you have this third ray soul, it is your bounden duty to do something about it. The extent of that is the choice of your personality. The third ray of active intelligence, with the love and responsibility for the lower kingdoms, but particularly the animals, and their work to give voice to the animals. give them a voice in the world. The great characters of history who I can quote as being typical third-rate personalities: Henry Kaiser, the man who mass-produced the Liberty ships. We were losing the war because we couldn't get ships across the Atlantic safely. And that didn't seem as if it was going to be solved. And so the answer was more and more and more ships, thousands of them, all built the same way, all mass-produced. And it was Henry Kaiser, the ability of this third-rate personality with all what that implied. Not 2 ships, not 20 ships, not 100 ships, not even 1,000, but thousands of ships. And the problems that presented. And the third-rate brain has the ability to deal with such immense demands spread over a wide spectrum. In this country, it was Lord Beaverbrook. Lord Beaverbrook, I know these names don't mean anything to most of you, but you can look them up. First-rate soul with a third-rate personality again. And he took aircraft production in Britain when we were down to our last squadrons, and he transformed aircraft production in this miraculous third-rate personality method. And the last of these that I'm quoting, for instance, is Henry Ford, who had the ability to do that long before the others. Remember the tendencies of third-rate people: hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. And in most instances, the simple treatment of this is to have iodized salt on the table. You can buy it quite easily, put it on the table, and it doesn't matter whether your thyroid is up or whether your thyroid is down, the iodized salt will regulate it both ways. Cancer of the thyroid gland is something that is indicative for women. When women have thyroid cancer, it usually indicates an end of an evolutionary period in spiritual unfoldment, in that the throat center is no longer the target of attention. It means that the bringing up of energies from the sacral center, that's the earth, to Saturn, which is the throat center, has now been completed successfully. And the proof of it is, for women anyway, that cancer of the thyroid gland ensures that that process is over. Thyrotoxicosis, Hashimoto's disease. Is anybody waving the T flag at me? 3 minutes, all right. Let's just do occupations, Marcus. The occupations of the third ray, well, they arise out of what we've already considered. Things like forestry, care of the forests, the proper use of the second kingdom of nature, the plant kingdom, which at its own level is nearer to perfection than the human, which at its own level is closer to perfection mainly in flowering plants. If you want to know what a human is going to be when he's near to perfection, study the flowering plant. Because the human aura begins to give off, not its odors, but give off its vibrations so that such people can be felt. Felt in healing, felt in teaching, felt in their presence. Forestry, conservationists, naturally, green movement, any kind of expression, environmentalists, horticulturists, these people always side with nature, even if it is aggravating to everyone around them. They will side with nature. Sometimes we don't understand how they can be so damn persistent in their environmental demands, but that is their nature. Gamekeepers, economists, bankers, and counselors, especially counselors lately. We all know that the terrible tragedies that inevitably hit mankind, for the population of the earth is beginning to overcrowd. And where there is overcrowding, you can expect massive tragedies occurring, to say nothing, of course, of terrorism. But those who suffer, apparently, today need counseling. I can't understand why that is so, I must confess. That everybody has to be counseled after a tragedy. Nobody damn well counseled me after World War II, nor any of my friends that I can remember. But nevertheless, that's the way things are going. And the third ray, through gentle experiences alone, can be good counselors. Museum caretakers, of course. Organizations that favor the third ray, Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, World Wildlife Fund, animal rights, of course. Don't forget what I said earlier with regard to animal rights and vivisection. What is morally wrong can never be justified in any expression of human achievement. And we will suffer the karma that this country is beginning to suffer now from the mad cow disease. Feeding creatures who are herbivores with something completely different to them. Never mind whether it was contaminated meal or not. Asking for karma. Begging for it. And we mustn't allow that sort of thing. Anywhere, whether we can prove that it's giving bad results or not, we just should not allow it. And my last plea, no, I feel I can't do that one. Sorry. Let us now look at the mental body, the third ray mental body. We must expect a mental body that can embrace many fields of expression naturally. And one of the ways that the mental body can express itself is reading, naturally. It's a mental process. But the third ray mind can sometimes get out of control. You can see it reflected in some of the writers whose personalities have been on the third ray. I'm going to read you an excerpt from one of the finest authors of our age, Virginia Woolf. And she wrote a book called Mrs. Dalloway, and this is an excerpt from it, to show you the nature of the third ray mind and the risks that are involved there. It was at Bourton that summer, early in the 90s, when he was so passionately in love with Clarissa. There were a great many people there, laughing and talking, sitting round a table after tea, and the room was bathed in yellow light and full of cigarette smoke. They were talking about a man who had married his housemaid, one of the neighbouring squires. He had forgotten his name. He had married his housemaid, and she had been brought to Bourton to call. An awful visit it had been. She was absurdly overdressed like a cockatoo. Clarissa said, imitating her, and she never stopped talking. On and on and on she went. Clarissa imitated her. Then somebody said, Sally Seton it was. Did it make any real difference to one's feelings to know that before they'd married she had had a baby? In those days, in mixed company, it was a bold thing to say. He could see Clarissa now, turning bright pink, somehow contracting and saying, oh, I shall never be able to speak to her again. Whereupon the whole party sitting round the tea table seemed to wobble. It was very uncomfortable. Third ray mind. Couldn't care less about branching off into some sideline, some anything which expressed the flow of the mind. And don't forget, this was a brilliant woman, a very brilliant woman, highly respected and recommended to English students at university. Now I want to show you a third ray mind.
Can I just change that?
Yes.